For this half of my Honors American Literature summer reading assignment, I'm going to be comparing and contrasting Steve Irwin to Chris McCandless, and then I'm going to talk about Steve Irwin's life and his successful journey of life. First, I'm going to be talking about the similarities that Steve and Chris both had in common. First, they both came from a pretty wealthy family, and they both loved the nature so much. They both sadly passed away at a very young age from a very unexpected death. And they both had a lot of publicity after their death that made them famous all around the world. And finally, people thought they were absolutely insane. For example, people thought Chris was insane because he went out into the middle of Alaska with limited knowledge and limited skills, thinking he could survive on his own. And people thought Steve was crazy because he thought he could trap the most dangerous, deadliest, largest animals of planet Earth. Some of their differences, though, was Steve actually had his own TV show, whereas Chris didn't. Chris wrote in his journal, and someone wrote a book after him, while as Steve had a camera crew following him around while he trapped the crocodiles and the deadly animals. Another difference they had was Chris died from starvation, while Steve died from an animal attack to the chest. Some of their ideals were different, though. Chris loved nature itself and loved being out in the trees and the wilderness, while as Steve wanted to be with the animals of the nature and the very big crocodiles and the snakes and just the very deadly animals and big animals of the nature. Some of their values they shared was they both loved nature. It was their escape place to go to. It was where they loved the most. They've always wanted to be in nature since they were little kids. It's where they would just always go for their free time and where they needed to go to get their mind off things. Something they could learn from each other was for them to be more careful. For example, if they were more careful, they wouldn't have taken the risks they took. I also think they could have learned to be more cautious of their surroundings and taken more knowledge before they went out and took the risks they did. Now I'm going to be talking about Steve Irwin's life. Steve Irwin was known as the crocodile hunter. He was a man who would take action into trapping big animals and showing people all around the world how deadly and how dangerous these animals actually can be. So people of the world other than him wouldn't have to go out and see how dangerous they really were. He was here to show them they were really dangerous and they could hurt them really bad if they actually tried to conquer him, just like Steve tried to conquer them. Steve was a very successful man. He had his own TV show, but before he had his own TV show, he would record videos of himself trapping these crocodiles, and he would send them to producers, and one producer hired him as a TV commercial consult. And then that producer sent the video clips to another producer at the Australian Channel 10 News, and the producer of the Australian Channel 10 News decided to give Steve Irwin his own 10-hour documentary. And after the 10-hour documentary was over, they turned that documentary into a TV series, and that's where his TV series ended up after his documentary. Steve also was very successful because he turned Beerwah Park into an Australian zoo in 1992, which made it a very big popular zoo in Australia. He only came across a few stumbles on his journey of life, though, and the only stumble he came across was a very, very big stumble. He actually ended up passing away because of this block in his life. And what happened was he was recording another documentary called The Ocean's Deadliest, and he was out in the shallow near the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and in the shallow water there was a bullhead stingray, and he got too close to the stingray, I guess, and the stingray attacked him and stung him in the chest, and that sent him to an immediate cardiac arrest, and about an hour later they pronounced Steve Irwin dead. But other than that, he was a pretty successful man. He taught kids all around the world to be more cautious of these animals, that you need to take them at severe risk, that they can really injure you. He also taught these people to take more care of the endangered species and take more care of the endangered habitats. He also taught many people to just be more cautious in general around any animal, that they could be very dangerous at any moment in time. Steve Irwin at a very young age learned how to do all of this trapping of the deadly animals with his dad. His dad taught him back in the outback in Australia how to capture lizards and some poisonous snakes and some crocodiles. He also learned how to do rehab for injured and abandoned kangaroo, wallabies, and birds. And at the age of 9, he learned how to subdue a crocodile by jumping on its back. And that is my summer reading lit project about Steve Irwin and Chris McCandless.